just like that, we are back for another episode of the RUCKCast. I had to remember which show we're recording. So, good morning, Jim.
Morning, John.
How are you, sir?
I'm all right. How are you doing?
Oh, all things considered, I'm alive, so I'll take it.
What
All
do
right.
you want to talk about today?
Oh, I think there's this IoT story that I saw from a guy named Jim Palmer, and I thought you might know him. Figure we could talk about him a little bit. Nothing but good stuff. But let's talk about IoT and how it ties into Ruckus a little bit, if you will.
Yeah, no problem. And for those of you wondering, John's referring to a blog that I'm actually working on. We haven't published it yet. So this will actually, the podcast will be published before the blog is. Um, so we're going to talk about something that you can't read just yet, which I know surprises everybody. But it's all about a story I have with my neighbor across the street. And I'm all about stories in my personal life that I end up tying back into IT. So my neighbor across the street has built a smart home, if you will. And the big thing that he was bragging to me about one day when we were, doing like neighbors do, especially, you know, nerdy neighbors, we sit around and we were talking, and he was like, I can say, you know, the name of my voice assistant, which I'm not going to advertise. And he's like, I can simply say that and then say good night. He goes, when I go to bed each night, and he goes, and my smart home will turn off the lights. It'll lock the front door. It'll make sure the garage door is closed, and it'll set my thermostat for my nighttime setting. And I was like, hey, that's kind of cool. So I thought, I should do that too, because I'm a nerd. And at some point in time, every IT nerd has to dabble in the smart home IoT stuff. And so I did that. And I went and I found a commercial hub, and I had my little voice assistant set up, and I got a little sensor. I went and got a little $15, $20 sensor. I put it on my back door. And it was pretty cool. It worked. I got it set up in just a couple of minutes. I'd open the back door and it would play a little announcement, and it says, oh, the back door is open. And then I'd close the back door and go, oh, the back door is closed. And I was like, hey, this is kind of cool. Except I wanted to know, is my back door open or closed when I'm sitting in my office? And so I was sitting in my office and I said, hey, back door. Or hey, voice assistant, is my back door open? And it came back and it said, that's not supported, or, the network isn't there, or, and I was like, man, what is going on? And so I went, checked my back door, and sure enough, opened the door, wait a second or two, get the little notification ding on my speaker. Oh, the back door is open. Okay. And then I close it. Back door's closed. I was like, okay, that's all working. So I was like, maybe I'm doing something wrong, because I really, my back door is kind of central to my house. And so it's pretty simple to know if it's open or closed. And so, I was like, this is really weird. I with the kid and the dog and everybody, it's like the back door, especially in the summertime, is always opening and closing. And my biggest thing is, I'm like, I don't want to air condition or heat the outside. So, is my back door closed or is my back door open? So I go across the street to my neighbor, and I'm like, his name's Walt. And I'm like, hey, Walt. I was like, does your smart home tell you? I was like, can you find out if your back door, if your door is open or closed, or, some stuff like that? And he's like, well, I can see my front door. And I said, that's not what I asked, Walt. I said, what if you're upstairs? And he goes, oh, I can't see my front door. And I said, well, is it open or closed? And he's like, I don't know, man. And so he, so he's like, I got to go test this. So he goes and tests it, and he comes back and he goes, I can't find out if my front door is open or closed or not. And I was like, how do we have smart homes that lack monitoring? I was like, I don't want to close my front door, close my back door. I mean, that's actuators and motors and stuff. I don't want to be that fancy. I'm not there. It's not the Jetsons yet, but I was like, I'd really like to know when I'm sitting in my office if, the kid let the dog out and then forgot to close the back door. And I was like, and it didn't work. And I was shocked. And it was funny because after talking to Walt, Walt was like, well, damn, now I want this too. He's like, I want to know if my kids left the doors open or closed. And he goes, but I can't. He's like, man. And so both Walt and I were stumped. And so that's where this all came from was, me wanting to know if I was air conditioning the outside. Cause let's face it, I'm an old dad, right? I mean, I don't want to air condition the outside. I don't want to leave all my lights on. I'm that dad. So that's where this whole thing came from.
Nice. I mean, I think everybody, and I'm not going to say it either because I've got one sitting at my desk and I don't want to trigger it. But I mean, everybody's got this.
So do I.
Yeah, So you don't want to trigger it. I feel like somebody did a podcast like that where they mentioned it and everybody's went off. But so while they have an ecosystem, so do we. And by we, I mean Ruckus. And then not an ecosystem, but more of a, what would you call it? A management overlay.
Yeah. And this is where it got interesting for me, right? Because I was like, I was really sad for a couple of hours. I was like, man, I'm really sad because it worked well. And it's Zigbee, right? Just we'll get that out there. I got some Zigbee sensors. I actually have two of them sitting on my desk. And I was so disappointed. I actually went and got a second Zigbee sensor because I was like, maybe I just cheaped out. And, because I went with the $15, $20 sensor, I was like, maybe I can get a more expensive sensor. So I actually have another little sensor that I'm holding up. It's actually kind of nice. It's a little one, right? And I was like, and it's like a multi-purpose sensor too. So it does like temperature and a couple other things I haven't figured out. I just want to know is my back door open or closed? And so I went and got another one, same problem. And so I was like, man, what is going on? And then it dawned on me because, I'm smart, but sometimes I can, especially IT guys, we get so fixated on things that we forget like stuff that's staring us in the face. And I went, wait a second. I was like, I have a Ruckus Wi-Fi network in my house, and it's all Wi-Fi 6 at this point. I finally got it upgraded to Wi-Fi 6, thanks to some horse trading and some other friendly people who've helped me out with that. And I was like, each one of our Ruckus APs that I have in my house, and I have 3 different models. I don't need them. I just like playing with them, but they all have IoT on board. And I was like, and one day I'm sitting there and I'm staring at my AP that's hanging in my living room. And I was like, wait a second. I was like, these things have IoT on board. I was like, what does that mean? Because I'd never played with it. And so I started delving into the Ruckus IoT story. And I was like, and after playing with it for a while, I was like, wow. I was like, this is actually kind of cool. So I think we do have an ecosystem for IoT. You said you weren't sure if you'd call it an ecosystem. I would. But the one thing that I quickly discovered is it's not for home use. So oddly enough, though, and I'll get back to Walt, there is a part of the Ruckus IoT solution that my buddy Walt across the street now wants for his house. And we'll get to that here in a little bit. But that's where it all started from, is I was like, let me actually take a look at it. And let me figure out what is the Ruckus IoT story and what can we do? And like I said, the one thing that I realized very, very early on was we lack the voice interface that, most consumer stuff has. And I was a little sad for a little bit until I realized, well, but while there's people that use Ruckus at their house, it's not built for people to use at their house. I know a lot of people that use it, but I mean, how many people do you know outside of IT people that run a enterprise class or enterprise grade Wi-Fi system at their home?
I know many.
I mean, I know we've both done it, but of course we're hosting a Wi-Fi podcast, so that makes sense. But like, none of my neighbors do. And so I was thinking, but if you
go ahead,
but if you have an organization and you have 15, 20 APs and let's say you have that many doors, or maybe you got 40 doors, you got twice as many doors, and you got windows and you got sensors. And all of a sudden, it's like if every single time you open a door or a window, a little voice announcement popped up on the speaker sitting on our desk that said, "Hey, door 301 is open." How annoying would that be with 50 doors?
Yeah, probably pretty annoying.
So I quickly realized that, well, it's not great for home use because my wife can't do any of this stuff. It's not what it was designed for. So I quickly got over not having that aspect in the Ruckus IoT solution.
Then, and the nice thing about it, right, is, okay, yeah, you lose the voice assistant, which, depending on how you look at it, is a nice thing or not. I mean, we use it mostly around like Christmas. Honestly, we have it set to turn on the lights, and so we don't have to
Mm-hmm.
like reach behind the tree. But otherwise, it's we don't use it a lot. I don't do a whole lot of the smart home stuff. But the nice thing is, to your point, our solution is kind of focused. I mean, it can work anywhere. Obviously, if you put it on Ruckus AP, you've got an IoT radio in pretty much all the models, I think, that are current at this point. And if you don't have an IoT radio, we've got USB ports on all the APs, and it's an easy way to fix it. But it's definitely focused at not the home IT mega nerds like us, but rather the MDU, the hospitality space, those kinds of verticals, where we have a lot of traction, both in, AP deployments, but, what are they looking to do in terms of, like you said, door locks, environmental sensors, hot, cold, leak sensors, things like that. I know I've got some customers that I've talked to or heard about, where they're using it to know when apartments are vacant, to make sure that, when the last cleaning crew leaves, the lights go off and the thermostat gets set down to, whatever, 55 degrees, so they're not heating an apartment that they don't have a renter for, because at the end of the day, until that's rented again, that's the landlord's cost. And if you're in a freezing cold climate and you're heating an apartment for a couple months, I mean, it adds up. And especially if you got properties, like hundreds of properties, it adds up pretty quick. So there's definitely a benefit there, but that's kind of my exposure to it. I can see the value. I like the idea of it. I mean, I think, I'm a nerd. I would love to have some sensors around the house to know when doors are left open, or, you know, uh, if we've got a leak or a flood or something going on, because we've had all those problems before. And it's one of those where if you got this sensor out there that can tell you, and for us, I think it would be like a notification on your phone. I think it would be something going off, I think. But maybe you know a little bit more than I do.
So the other vertical you didn't talk about is like education and K-12. We have a partnership with a company called Soder, and they do vape detectors. And a lot of our K-12 customers will use this vape detector and they'll put it in the bathroom. And there's part of the, so with the Ruckus IoT solution, you have the APs that have the radios. And I've been playing around with this a lot ever since, I was like, hey, is my back door open? And I was like, man, I can't tell if my back. And so I've been playing around with this. And you have the APs, and then the next step in the process is what's known as the Ruckus IoT controller. And it's a virtual thing. So it's actually, we refer to it internally, and I think some of our marketing stuff is vRIoT, the virtual Ruckus IoT. And it's the vRIoT controller. And this controller is to your IoT network what the WLAN controllers, cloud and smart zone, are to your Wi-Fi network. And so you spin up this virtual Ruckus IoT controller, the vRIoT, and that allows it gives you a dashboard, and it gives you a lot of cool information about your IoT network. But it's cool for managing and running it, but it's actually missing a piece. And I covered this in the blog, where I'm like, hey, here's the vRIoT. This is how you do it. But one of the things that it does is it actually allows organizations to help secure their IoT network, because it actually gives you an inventory of, hey, what IoT devices are on my network, and security people are always like, well, who's talking? Who's on the network? What's the inventory? We want to know. And vRIoT gives us that ability. I can go look and I can say, hey, here is this this sensor. Here is this detector. This is a motion detector, a vape detector, or something like that. But it's sort of missing a piece of it. And so while we do that there's a third piece. And this is the thing that intrigues me the most, because I don't feel like we talk about it enough, is another virtual server called IoT Insights. And IoT Insights is actually where I was like, wow, this is really cool, because it then brings that IoT solution full picture in a way that I don't know I've seen from any other vendor. This allows us to do the really cool things where we can actually map out on floor plans where our IoT sensors are, and we can see the status of them. And then it'll play. If you have multiple floors, you can set it to play through a loop. So you can throw it up on a SOC screen or a knock screen or something like that. And it'll actually, when the back door opens, the sensor changes and it lists it on a list on the right-hand side of the image that says, hey, the back door is open. And I was like, wow, this is, so this gives me a visual representation of what's happening. And it also then allows me the last little piece that we take advantage of, that our K-12 customers take advantage of, is when the vape detector detects that somebody's been vaping in the bathroom, because that's their favorite place to do it. I mean, I think there was a song in the 80s or 90s called Smoking in the Boys' Room.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, well, it might not be smoking anymore. It's vaping, and it's always in the restrooms, right? Now you can't put a camera in the restroom, but what they figured out is you can put a camera right outside the restroom. So when the vape detector detects that somebody's vaping, it triggers a camera to record who's coming out of the restroom. And so at that point, they can go, while they don't know exactly who was doing it, they know who to go ask. And all of that is done in the IoT Insights side. And we have, I didn't realize this, but we have a ton of different, it's called the Insight Marketplace. We have a ton of different types of integrations that allow you to trigger video cameras, that allows you to do if this, then that, the IFTTT stuff. We can send text messages, we can send emails. This is where all that comes in, is that's the integration piece. And it's and like I said, the map part's pretty cool, because you can put in a map and then you drop, basically like you drop Wi-Fi access points on a map. You drop your IoT stuff on a map and say, here's this, here's this. And then when you stare at the screen, you look at you throw it up on a big screen in a knock, and you go, oh, here's the floor plan. And I can look at this floor plan for 10 seconds or 30 seconds, whatever you want to configure. And it'll show you the status of all of your IoT stuff. And then it'll rotate to the next floor and rotate to the next floor. And it'll tell you like, hey, is the battery low in my sensor? Now, the vape detector sensor is cabled into a switch, so we don't have to worry about batteries there. But some of these other sensors, there's batteries. And I was pretty cool. It was pretty cool because I was playing with it and I kept, opening and closing my back door. My battery prematurely died in my back door sensor. And so I was looking at it and I was like, oh, and then I got this alert on my IoT Insights that said, hey, the back door sensor battery is low. You need to go change it. And I was like, visibility. I mean, how many, times have you heard about visibility into the network? I need visibility into the network.
That's key. I mean, it's big. It's a big deal. And there was, I remember in a past life, not quite the same exact use case, but you mentioned the batteries, right? And that's, a big deal. And I had a previous employer had a very large outdoor deployment, and they were doing they wanted to put BLE out. And the sensors that they were putting out, and everything it was all beacons, everything was battery powered, but there was no visibility to it.
Mm-hmm.
So they just knew there was literally they had a guy that they hired twice a year to go change
Whether they needed them or not.
Yeah, exactly. And so, you get anything like that you can change that, and you can see the visibility, because I mean, is it this? I mean, let's be honest, right? They're cheap sensors for the most part. Some
Yes.
of them are a little bit more expensive, but anybody can go on, any preferred common internet marketplace, not going to plug anybody because we're not sponsored, um, and go buy one for anywhere 5, 10, 15, $20. And you can spend more, but they're cheap at the end of the day, and they're battery powered. So does it die? Does the battery run out? Is the sensor flaky? But to have any visibility on it and to know, assuming you placed it on your map correctly, where it is that's giving you the problem is good. And then obviously the other side of the coin is if it's working correctly and it shows you where something's happening, that's also good. It's giving you the visibility that you didn't previously have. So I can see, like you said, MDU, hospitality, education. Whether it's a college campus or a high school campus. I mean, the applications here are pretty, cool. And I know going back to about a year ago, you and I were talking about doing a really, a deep dive on how we could stand this up. And I think the insights part was the piece we were missing at the time. Getting that visibility and then siloing it, because that's the other nice thing. I believe this is the piece, and if it's not the piece, I know there is a piece where, if you're talking MDU, and for those who don't speak the parlance, MDU, multi-dwelling unit, so hotels would be hospitality, MDU would be apartments, condos, in some case high-end resident housing for colleges, dorms, things like that. But everybody wants a smart home. Not everybody has a home. They might have a condo, they might have an apartment, but it's their smart home. And so if I got it wrong, let me know. I apologize, but I think it's insights. And if it's not insights, we do have a tool that overlays that. If I have an apartment, you have an apartment, and Ruckus owns the apartment building, Ruckus has the admin view and can see all the sensors going off that are theirs. But we have the ability to add sensors to that network because we've got Ruckus access points in our apartments because they were provided part of the lease agreement. But we can add our own sensors to our own home so that I can have a smart thermostat and I can have a drip sensor to make sure I didn't leave the water running or whatever. And Ruckus doesn't necessarily get to see that as the landlord, and you don't get to see it as my neighbor, but they're all running on the same backbone IoT infrastructure, which is pretty cool.
And it is insights, and there's what it does is it allows you to segment out the building to where you can say, and it's almost like there's a term for it, but it allows you to segment it out to where, you can segment that off and you can segment that down and say, you can see your apartment, I can see my apartment. The other cool thing that allows us to do is within the IoT controller is we can actually assign VLANs. So we can actually take the IoT network and we can assign it to a VLAN. Now in a education environment or somewhere where you're running the entire building and you have that visibility and you own that, then you go, hey, I'm going to segment off all my traffic, all my IoT traffic, and I'm going to put it into its own VLAN. And then you can overlay that with tunnels or other type of protocols in order to kind of keep that segmented to where you can't bust out and get into your data center VLANs and go hack your customer lists and stuff like that. There's actually a famous story behind that where a casino got breached through the front desk fish tank heater. They put in a brand new fish tank and a fish tank heater, and they wanted to make it smart so they could automatically adjust and monitor the temperature of the fish tank so that they could keep their fish, which is expensive and there's a lot of money in that, alive, except there was a vulnerability within the IoT device. But because of the way they deployed it on their network, hackers were able to get in and they were able to steal the entire database of the casino. And they got it out through the fish tank heater, and they picked up on it when they realized that the fish tank heater was using video protocols to send a crap ton of data to Europe. And this was in the US. And so it was why is my fish tank heater sending gigabytes of data to Europe? And they went, that's probably a problem. And then that's how they figured it out. And so, but by able to, the AP says, this is IoT, this is coming in through my IoT radios. I'm going to drop it onto a specific VLAN, and it can be a different VLAN from your Wi-Fi traffic. Or in the case of MDU, you put it on the same VLAN as your IoT traffic or use your Wi-Fi traffic so that the people in that apartment, in that condo, in that whatever, now have their own network. Now, in a disclaimer, and I actually have been watching some emails about this over the past week or so, which is what has triggered my blog post, is we're still working on the ability, if you have more than one apartment or dorm or whatever per AP. So IoT stuff gets dropped on one VLAN today. In the future, the plan is to be able to do that differently so that we can end up with the micro segmentation and be able to and do that a little bit more efficiently. So full disclaimer, don't go out. If you have one AP serving 3 dorm rooms and each one of them has their own SSID or they're put on their own VXLAN, the IoT stuff isn't quite there yet. But the IoT Insights is the one you're thinking of, that we do have that the ability to say, hey, you get, it's kind of like with the Smart Zone high scale, where it's like you only get access to this particular part of the controller. You can only see this domain and you can hide all the other ones. And so that's what IoT Insights is. But it's really interesting because that's where it all of a sudden starts to make sense. And this is where, when I was talking to my buddy Walt, to kind of bring this full circle, because Walt and I talked about smart homes for a while, and he came back to me and he goes, you know what I'd really love? He goes, because I'm kind of tired of the voice. He goes, I would love to have a screen. He goes, like hanging in my kitchen or, somewhere in the main part of my house. And he goes, that I can look at a map and it will tell me at a glance what the status of my entire IoT network is. He's like, that's what I would really love. And it was finally, I was able to look at Walt and go, when you're ready to do that, let me know, because I have the solution for you. I have this. And he looked at me and he goes, we need to talk. And I was like, I know. And we never got back to it, but, life gets in the way. But it was funny because, all of a sudden, when I asked Walt, is your door open? And he's like, I can't tell. And then he comes back to me. He's like, I want a map. And I was like, guess what, buddy? I got a map for you. But it's funny because, we're going to you're going to put a link in the show notes to our IoT solution. But the IoT Insights part is the one part that we don't talk about enough. And that's kind of where the magic happens. That's where all this stuff kind of comes into play. And so that's the piece that when I was playing around with it, learning about my backdoor, that I went, man, this is the part that we need to talk about. And so when we were looking for a topic, I said, you know what, let's talk about, basically, this is IoT Insights, because we have documentation on everything else. And, but Insights is where the cool part happens. And there's another piece that I was thinking of when I was writing a blog that I want to bring up is I imagine in my head that, because where I live, they've been building a boatload of warehouses with e-commerce and stuff like that. They need more warehouses. I mean, maybe not where you live or in your part of the woods, because you're on the East Coast and everything that's not housing is warehouse. But where I live,
we're building a lot of them too.
Lots of warehouses. I was like, if you put a sensor on every bay door and you knew when the door was open and when the door was closed, you could tell how long one of your shipping bays was occupied by a trailer based on, is the door open and are we working the trailer, or is the door closed? And it's like, imagine if you could then take that information, how long the door was open, and you could put that into a analytics machine that could then tell you how fast are these trucks loaded, how fast are these trucks unloaded. And then if you could figure out, like, why do some trucks take longer than others, you could optimize your operation as a shipping and receiving warehouse and actually turn your product faster, turn those trucks faster. And I was like, that would be something really interesting. So I went and looked, and guess what? In IoT Insights, in the marketplace, there's an analytics hook. And I was like, ooh, now I want to get my hands on a warehouse and go, can I figure out how long it takes to load a truck, how long it takes to unload a truck? Is there a way that we can trigger that to where, it's like, oh, scan a bar, kind of like with janitors going to a restroom, right? Like, how long does it take me to clean the restroom? I scan the barcode when I go in, I get a timestamp, I scan it when I go out. It's like, is there a way that we could figure that out using IoT to make warehouses more efficient?
Probably. I mean, everything at this point it's all AI and ML and IoT, and it's alphabet soup.
Well, it is, but you also need a little bit, and this is where, we're going to go outside of our avenue here and talk about that new chat bot thing they came up with.
Oh boy.
you know, it's funny because that's really cool and it does really good stuff, but it's still not perfect. There's still times when you can ask it a question or you can do, and it'll come out with something really kind of off and weird just based on how you write the question. It's still missing that whole aspect of the human. And so the chat GPT, I
Yep.
think that's what they call it. It's missing that aspect of how do I take all this data I have and efficiently turn it into the information I want. You still have to go tell it that stuff. And so it's a way of taking the data that we're getting from our IoT networks and saying, I want to slice it and dice it a little differently to look at it in a way, in a method that hasn't been done before. And so you can't get that from artificial intelligence. You can get it from machine learning, but you still need that person to sit down and say, I want to slice and dice my metrics, my data, to give me a metric that tells me how efficiently my trucks are loaded. And so we have that stuff, but you still need people, you still need engineers, you still need to sit down with the tools like, Ruckus APs with, depending on which model you have, it has built-in Zigbee and BLE. Or like you said, it's got the USB dongle using a Ruckus IoT controller to manage your IoT devices. Hey, if it's stolen, you can blacklist it and be like, I mean, that's something you don't know if it's stolen. You just know that there's a problem. You send a guy out, you dispatch a tech. Tech goes, oh yeah, just went offline for whatever reason. Maybe somebody got broken, or they go out and say, "Go, it's stolen, it's missing," and you go, "Oh, let me blacklist it." So I close that door to my network. I can secure my network that way. You still need that human interaction in this stuff to make sure that we're making the right decision. And then taking that information with IoT insights, to where you can see the map. You can say, hey, what is my status? Is there a leak? Is the door open? Are all my doors locked? Can I trigger something when we hit a panic button that makes sure that all of the doors close and lock? And then get a confirmation of that. You glance at the screen. That door is not locked. Why is that door not locked? Why is my smart lock not reporting that back? So you still need that human in there to be able to say, what does this information mean to me? Because if you rely on artificial intelligence and machine learning to do all your thinking for you, then it's going to end up giving you information that's not correct. And so we still need that in there. We still need all of these different products that we can go take a look at and then manipulate. And then once you get it done, then it's a little bit easier to just let the thing, you can use AI and ML to figure out, hey, how long does it take to load my truck or unload my truck, or why is, you can allow that to give you the information, but you still have to be able to ask it for the right things using the right type of data inputs.
Yeah, I mean, I look at it as a work smarter, not harder kind of scenario. We've all been in the offices in the old days when you used to have the security guards walking around and doing the rounds, and those things are still necessary. I mean, I remember before the pandemic, that we had put like RFID tags on all the doors, and the guards used to have to carry a reader, and it was you knew what it was, right? It was the office's way of knowing that the guards actually checked in and all the locks and doors and everything that they said they did.
Right.
Um, but this takes it another step further. And like you said, you sit at the guard station, or say you've got a centrally managed school district, and you want to know or make sure that at 8:30 when school is in session and all the doors are supposed to be closed and the students in there, especially with what's going on, you're sitting there some central office making sure that all the school doors are closed. And if
Mm-hmm.
there's not, maybe you've got a school officer in one school and maybe he's the only one. But you can sit there and say, hey, officer, what's his name? Go look at that door real quick before you go take your coffee break or whatever. So it is definitely, it's to steal a term from the military, force multiplier. We can't be everywhere, and you're not going to hire a million guards or a million whatever engineers to do all the monitoring of a particular system. And that's the other thing too, right? We've been talking about IoT sensors in terms of like door locks and temperature sensors, but maybe not IoT insights and maybe not our Ruckus solutions, but industrial places use it all the time to monitor plants. And you mentioned warehouses. There's a litany of applications for IoT that we haven't even touched. And I'm not saying we can or we can't do it with Ruckus, but there's a lot of uses out there for areas that weren't necessarily getting monitored or in harsh environments. I think of an industrial like a gas plant or something like that. Some of those areas, you put a sensor in it and the sensor has to last for a couple of years because to replace it, you have to shut down that part of the plant. But you need that sensor to tell you the critical information because you can't put a human there. It's just an unsafe environment for a person to be in there on a regular basis. So, yeah, work smarter, not harder. Um, but cool. No, it's definitely a cool product. I mean, I think we knew it was a cool. Just the Ruckus IoT deployment was cool, and I think Insights was that missing piece for us, like you said. Um, and I don't know when you talked to Walt, but I remember when I got my first demo of it. I was at SCTE in September, and Jay Besterman, who is in our managed services group, was doing demos of it on the floor. And I saw it, and for me, that was like the aha moment. I was like, okay, it's not just I can run my house with it. It's I can actually see what it's doing, and I can see what's actually closed or armed or whatever the status is that I need it to be. Like that, put it all together. And Jay's got some pretty cool demos where like he has a bowl of water with a water sensor, and if the sensor goes in the water, the light bulb lights up, and things like that. He's got a door, like a fake door jam kind of sensor, and you can show like again, door opens, light goes off, light blinks. And some of these are great, when you think about the different applications. And I know, like you talk about accommodation, right? So if you got like a deaf person, they've got fire alarms for them, and they've got different, doorbells that they set up that they would flash a light. And like I know now, like your phone, you can have it set to flash your camera flash if you're hard of hearing or whatever when it rings. But usually in years past, you paid extra, like sometimes a lot extra to get those kinds of accommodations. And now with something like IoT, you can get those with a sensor and a little bit of ingenuity, whether it's our Ruckus IoT or not. It's bringing a lot of these things that used to be inaccessible to us. It is bringing it to everybody. Again, forgetting the cool enterprise grade wireless that we have in our houses for a minute, but it's a pretty cool thing, I think, as a nerd. And the nice thing is, I know there's some other platforms out there. I think Samsung has one, which we actually have a partnership with, I believe, or I'm not sure exactly the official terms of the agreement, but we do work with them. And the beauty part is Zigbee is open, or not open, but readily available. I think it's pretty prevalent. There's a couple other IoT standards that we work with, and I can't recall them off the top of my head, but we're not locked into one particular format. And I know there's some new stuff coming that we're looking at. So it's definitely a pretty cool, and like you said, it's a part of our ecosystem that doesn't get a lot of attention. But as I've been talking to customers and I've been hearing customers ask about it, I think it's an area that's going to get a lot of attention in the coming years because it's something that it's built in. I mean, at the end of the day, most of our access points that these people are running have it already. So you're not paying extra for it for the radios. Whereas if you went out and put some other overlay, IoT network, you're adding radios, you're adding expense, you're adding support costs. And it's like, just pick a solution that works with the radios that are already in our gear and done. So yeah, I think it's pretty cool. And I'm kind of excited to see where it takes us.
Yeah. So you were talking about the alliance partners, which is, I guess, the technical. I'm looking at the website that we're going to put the link in the show notes so people can go find the website. It's comscope.com/ was it IoT? I think that was the or where did we put that? Product type, enterprise networking, IoT networking. So long link, that'll be in the show notes, but you can go take a look at it. And there's a listing of 10 different alliance partners that we work with: door locks, location and sensor data. Location using BLE is a big one. The vaping detect, and so we have all that stuff. You were hitting on the IoT APs. Actually, starting with Wi-Fi 5, but we're wave 2. So the 510, 610, 710 series, they were IoT ready, which meant you had to add in that USB module that would then onboard it. But they were able to that's what the USB port was there for. With the Wi-Fi 6 APs, the only one that doesn't have the radios built in is the R350. So the R350 does not have the IoT radio built in, but it is what's known as IoT ready. So you can add that USB module in. But the cool thing about the IoT protocols is they have a much greater range. So if you're looking at an MDU or a hospitality or something like that, and you do your Wi-Fi design, you don't have to turn on every single IoT radio on every single AP. So it's not a one-to-one thing. You can have if you have 6 APs on a floor, you can only have you might only need 3 IoT radios turned on in order to give you the coverage that you would need for 6 Wi-Fi APs. And so, you don't, so if you have a mix, R350s, R550s, R650s type of thing, if you have that mix in there, then you're fine. If you're running an all R350 network, then we probably need to talk. But it does give, like you said, and that was my aha moment, from 45 minutes ago, 45 minutes ago. That was my aha moment when I was sitting there on my couch staring at this AP going, wait a second. I was like, that's an R650. That's got IoT radios in it. What can I do with it? It's been sitting there. It's been hanging in my ceiling for a year. What do I do with it? It's like, and that's the thing. I think, it's always been like, I always see it's like, oh, we have IoT. Well, great. At this point, who doesn't have IoT radios in their enterprise class APs? The question is, what do you do with it? And so that's where I sort of was like, hey, let me dig into this and let me find out. And yeah, I was like, wow, this is actually really kind of some cool stuff. And at scale, it just makes so much more sense. I was like, I would really not like to do a little handheld app on my phone to try to manage 500 sensors or, it's like, no, there's things you do on your phone. There's things you do on your computer, and managing 500 IoT sensors is not something you do on your phone.
Yeah, it doesn't scale on a smartphone.
So,
well, cool. I don't know if we've got too much more we can drill into on our particular platform right now, although I'm sure if we wanted to, we could certainly grab somebody from the product side of things and pick their brains about where we're going with it. But I've heard a lot of exciting things, like I said, at the trade shows. It seems like it's a growth area for us. I think it's, like you said, you've got the AP. In a lot of cases, we've got partners, we've got customers that have these APs out there that, they've heard about IoT. Everybody's heard about it, and they want to do it. And maybe they didn't even realize that they bought it already, effectively. Which is nice. Like you said, you have 500 APs out there. You've got, if you've got the right ones, you probably have 500 IoT radios out there waiting to do their thing. So it's kind of a nice added benefit of going Ruckus. But again, I'm not sure what the other customers have out there. I'm not going into that, but it's yeah, I'm excited to see what the future holds for this. I think it's something we can do a lot with, and we just mentioned some of the use cases, and that it's tailored, or it can be tailored. Like you mentioned, the vaping solution, that was something that was kind of concocted with all the different parts of the marketplace. That wasn't something off the shelf, I don't think. So that's pretty cool. And actually, the first time I heard about that, and this is, yes, a segue, was at WLPC 2022 from another one of our SCs who had actually had a hand in deploying a vaping IoT solution because the school had a problem with it. So I think we're going to close the IoT book, but where are we going next, Jim? What do we have coming up in the next couple of weeks?
I don't know, John. Where are we going? Are we gonna?
Well, good Lord willing, and the creek don't rise. WLPC is in a couple of weeks, so we're chatting in, I guess, sort of close to late January at this point, and it's a little early this year. It's usually late February. This time it's early February. So 2 weeks from, oh no, wait, is it a week from tomorrow? Not tomorrow, Friday, right? Is it
2 weeks? 2 weeks from today is when WLPC starts, from when we're recording. So if you have a calendar,
no. It's a week from Friday.
that's when you start, because what are you doing?
Well, so I'm doing the boot camp,
So
right?
you're
Boot camp. Yeah, so I'm doing an RCWA boot camp on February 3rd, but I arrive next Friday,
yeah.
which it sounds like I've been sitting in my head. I've been saying 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, and then I'm like, wait a minute, it's Tuesday, but for whatever reason, this week already feels over for me. So a week from Friday, I fly out to Phoenix, and I've got the boot camp for 3 days or 2.5 days, and then WLPC itself starts registration. Not reg- well, yeah, registration,
Yep.
check-in, whatever you want to call it, is this. I'm gonna look at my calendar, make sure I don't get the days wrong. Monday, February 6th, and then the whole shindig opens up on the 7th. So
2 weeks from
yeah,
today, 2 weeks
yeah,
from right now when we're talking, which is the
it's
24th.
absolutely
So
scary. Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, we will be there. Easy for me to say. So like I said, I'll have the boot camp. Jim, I know, has a big 55-minute session on something, and you're doing a deep dive again. And
Mm-hmm.
we've got, I think, 6 or 7 Ruckus folks coming out. Most of us are giving a talk. Some of those talks probably aren't done yet. I'm not guilty of that at all. Um, and we will have a vendor session again, like we did last year. I believe we're doing it Tuesday night, shortly after the main conference wraps for the day. So if you want to come and talk to Jim or I and get a sticker, or tell us the podcast is wonderful, or otherwise, come visit us. Hopefully we can. I don't know, but we'll tweet on the social media side, but we'll get the deets out there, and everybody can come visit us, and it'll be a good time to be had by
More,
all.
more importantly, there's going to be other people other than just us that I'm actually really looking forward to seeing from the Ruckus side. We're bringing in one of our SEs, one of my, I'll admit, I got a man crush on him. Um, super, super smart guy. And you met him,
Yep.
not in person, but it's funny. I'll tell this story later, especially in Phoenix, but I met this guy. His name's Matt Hall. Hi, Matt. Um, at Black Hat in 2019, and I worked with him for 4 days. And right before I walked out the door, I should teach you about Wi-Fi one of these days, because the dude was so smart about switching, and he was, I mean, just like crazy, crazy smart. And he was like, dude, he goes, I'm a Wi-Fi SE, and I was like, oh. I was like, this entire time you've been working switching and coding and you know API stuff. And I was like, I didn't realize you were actually a Wi-Fi person. He goes, yeah, he goes, I'm a Wi-Fi SE. And so Matt's going to be there. I'm super excited about that. And there's actually a neighbor, not a neighbor, but
Close enough.
in a global company, a guy that lives 20 minutes away from you is your neighbor. Sharon's going to be there, and I'm really excited about Sharon and Matt being there. So don't come to the vendor session or anything else to talk to me or John, because we're just a bunch of rambling, yeah, wannabes. Come to talk to those guys, because those guys are really smart. And so I'm really excited that both of those guys are going to be there, and we're gonna be able to learn from those guys, because they do have a lot to teach. And so I'm really excited they're going to be there and they're going to share. So yeah, come to the vendor session, say hi to us, get a sticker, but then go talk to those guys, because they'll fix your problems.
Exactly. But yeah, no, it's going to be fun. A couple weeks away. Come say hi if you're listening, and you want to see us, or you don't want to see us, like you want to see some smart people.
Yeah.
Hopefully anybody listening who comes out. I mean, it's
Go
we'll
talk to
see.
Matt and Sharon. They're the smart ones. That's what I do behind the scenes when people are like, "Hey Jim, how do I fix this?" And I'm like, let me go check real quick. And my checking is I'm going to go ask somebody else. So now you can just skip me and you can go talk to those guys.
Just what they wanted. Well, all right. Another good session in the bag, and I think we're gonna call it a wrap on that one. I'm gonna hit the music, and I guess we're gonna record next when we're in Phoenix.
Yeah, we'll see each other. We haven't seen each other in a while, so we'll actually be in the same building at the same time in 2 weeks, and we should probably record. We might, you know what? Let's do some other cool, like little short recordings, and maybe do some like little mini episodes, and we can post them in, like, let's do something like that with some of these other smart people.
Could be fun. I'm in.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, man. Well, have a good one.
All right, I'll see you in Phoenix, man.